The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is a legendary game. It kickstarted the Nintendo Switch and became an instant classic. However, some things seen in the game could certainly be better. It wasn't flawless. But what can Nintendo add to this game to make it borderline perfect? Well, I have a total of 5 things that would certainly improve the game a ton. So let's have a look at that, shall we? Number 1. 10,000 years ago, the Sheikah built the Divine Beasts to combat Calamity Ganon. Piloted by 4 champions from the Zora, the Gorons, the Ruto and the Gerudo, they paved the way for victory against Ganon. In Breath of the Wild, these mechanical creatures are the main dungeons, and they're kind of like puzzle boxes. They look incredible from the outside, and the puzzles themselves are a fun challenge. However, they're too similar. A lot of people complained about this. The overall textures are the exact same in each one of them. This makes them a lot less memorable for sure. Back in the day, Zelda games like Ocarina of Time went with themed dungeons, for example the Forest and Water Temple. Both of them clearly did their own thing, and almost anyone you ask knows the difference between them. However, with these new Divine Beasts, this wasn't as clear. They all kind of looked and felt the same. They used different mechanics, and the puzzle box style isn't new at all, just look at the Water Temple, but still, they aren't as memorable as the previous ones. One way to solve this is giving them a more obvious theme with a different look as well. This would for sure solve the problem. Still, they remain puzzle boxes and are quite short, but at least they have something that separates them, and the same should certainly happen with the bosses. Because those also felt the same. The dungeons weren't perfect. They were fun, but very different. And this is probably the biggest problem. This isn't a bad thing, but in the end, a lot of people rather had the old format, which I can totally understand. These dungeons aren't my favorite as well. Number 2. Now, Breath of the Wild isn't your run-of-the-mill Zelda game. As you notice with the dungeons, some things changed. A completely new feature introduced in this game is cooking, which enables the creation of food that recovers hearts and bestows various effects. Meals are cooked by broiling up to 5 edible materials at cooking pots, such as meat, berries, fruits, or herbs. Elixirs can be mixed by including monster parts in various recipes. This stuff can have a lot of different effects, like increasing speed, strength, defense, and a whole lot more. Now, as you probably know, this is an extremely important element in the game. Without it, the game becomes 10 times harder. It's a great mechanic, and I think anyone who has even touched the game knows this. Who doesn't love experimenting? However, there's one problem. You can also collect various other things in the game that, for the most part, aren't very useful. Stuff like elemental crystals or guardian parts that can be sold, and some stuff can be traded, but you can't do any crafting with them. I would have loved to see craftable weapons, arrows, and armor. That would add another layer to the loot you find. Because now only the food items are actually useful, while everything else is only worth carrying for the rupees. When the game was in development, I thought that crafting your own items would be a big element as well. But we got none of that. Of course, not everything has to be like that. Items can also just be there to sell for some sweet rupees. However, in my opinion, too many of them fall in this category. Even if big items like armor and weapons weren't in the game, then at least add arrows, because those are always handy and aren't too overpowered. This is certainly something they could improve. Number 3. Now, another feature that they added in this game is a vast open world for Link to explore, which is kind of new. To understand what I mean with this, you have to watch the video I did over on my second channel, Game Architects. I will link it in the upper right corner. Most of Hyrule's scenery is accessible by walking, paragliding, or climbing. While the game still includes barriers such as weather effects, strong enemies, and more, many of these can be overcome by using food, effective weapons and armor, or finding alternative routes. This isn't really a problem. It's actually a great thing, and I love it a ton. However, because of this, one thing had to suffer: the main story. Just like the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, you can totally ignore it, and Breath of the Wild gives you even more options because you can even kill the final boss straight away. Now, as you could imagine, all the dungeons and story are optional. This made it overall not as good as the previous games. Sure, if you would look for all the details and read the diary entries of all important characters, then you would understand a whole lot more. But still, it required exploration. I've had many conversations with people about this, and we can blame the open world. Partially. Nintendo could have worked more on stuff like more facial expressions for Link, because he kinda looks like this.
Reckless thrill chasing has left him a hollow shell of his former self. Just look.
Every time he appears in a cutscene, little things like that kind of ruin the feel, so making him interact with his face like he did in the Wind Waker would certainly improve it. He would react and have an actual opinion for once. There are a lot more things they could do, and this is just one example. Sure, the open world makes it hard, but it's not impossible. Although I have to say that the story of Skyrim was also extremely irrelevant and forgettable. So Nintendo isn't the only one who didn't get this completely right. Number 4. In a game where exploring the world is extremely important and a big part of the game, you would expect long, meaningful, and world-altering quests, right? Majora's Mask, for example, had multiple of these, like the Romani Ranch and Anju and Cafe questlines. Those were extremely long, had a lasting impact on the story and the world itself, and this wasn't even an open-world Zelda game. Now, if we look at the ones seen in Breath of the Wild, then there are only a couple that actually have a lasting impact. For example, Terrey Town. Here you essentially help build a village from the ground up. Hudson, the one making it all, will first ask for more bundles of wood to build more houses. And over the course of the side quest, he will ask Link to recruit new employees into the Bolson construction to assist with repairing and operating the town. This is really cool, but the only thing you really do is look for specific people that can help and gather materials. I would have liked to see more than just that. Some actual events and active things to do. For example, monsters attacking the town at some point, and they kidnap one of the workers that you need to rescue. A bit like the beginning of Twilight Princess, where you have to save the kids from the village. However, this time around, it's not about some random monkey. Another thing that would make it a lot better is tasks that you have to complete in order to gain those new workers, helping them with some big, grand quest before they decide to join. Now, besides these changes, I would have loved to see more interesting side quests in general, because too many of them was just delivering materials to certain people. Sure, there were some where you had to save people or do something actually interesting, but there weren't enough of those. They had so many options when it came to this, but in the end, they're just too basic for my taste. It certainly didn't beat Majora's Mask, also known as the king of all side quests when it comes to the Zelda series. A bit of a shame, really. It had a ton of potential. Number 5. Now we arrived at my last point. The one thing that could have been so much better and would have made me extremely happy. I'm talking about the random NPCs that are in trouble encounters. Every now and then you come across travelers that are in need of a helping hand. Usually you see them fighting monsters, and if you rescue them, they will reward you with some cooked food. A nice bonus and fun thing you can stumble upon in the world. However, this mechanic could have been so much better. It could make the world a lot more alive and real for the player if there were multiple different scenarios. Here's a good example that could easily work. Travelers get attacked by bokoblins, and you can either save them in time, or they get taken prisoner by the bokoblins. If they are taken, the whole scenario will expand, because now they're stuck in a cage in a random bokoblin camp nearby. Link can go there, fight off the hordes of enemies because the spawn rate is increased to make it harder and more interesting, save the NPC, and get presented with a short cutscene of the person thanking him. And in the bigger camps you could even implement an escort section. Just let a couple of enemies respawn in the cutscene, and if you don't help the NPC, he gets kidnapped again. This would require almost no effort for the developers. Travelers can already be knocked unconscious by them, so adding the short thank you cutscene and a scenario wouldn't be a whole lot of trouble. All of this could have been in the game and would have made this an even more fun experience. And the enemy camps would also become a lot more interesting. Out of all the things that I mentioned in this video, this would be my top pick. I would love to see a mechanic like this in Breath of the Wild or the next game. Let's just hope that we get something like it. Hello there, thank you for watching video. Wily is on vacation, so click subscribe button and watch more video, thank you. Give AdSense. Men need to live. Thanks.